I want to turn to former FBI Assistant Director for the Criminal Investigative Division, Chris Swecker, and former U.S. Secret Service agent Michael Matranga. Glad to have both of you here. I want to begin with you, Chris, because, look, the administration says that law enforcement's ability to avert a tragedy was a success, right? But just hearing from the press conference, from the criminal complaint, I mean, this suspect was a guest at the hotel, armed with multiple weapons, and frankly, got incredibly close to getting at least in the proximity of that room. How do you see this?
Yeah, well, what I know about protection is that it's all about planning. The Secret Service doesn't want to fire their weapons in the line of duty. They don't want to have to confront somebody trying to bust past a magnetometer. They want to plan their way through these events to the point where they shut it down. There are no openings. There are no ways that sort of thing can happen. And the people on the ground did exactly what they should have done. They acted heroically. They actually prevented a disaster, a mass casualty event. I doubt they would have got to the president, but he would have got to the president, but he could have done a lot of damage. But having said that, we're in a hotel. Yep. And there are finite points of ingress and egress, and you can cover those. And we know that this would-be shooter came down through a staircase that was not sealed off. And I'll leave it to the next guest on this because he's an expert in that area. But I think you would seal those stairwells off and make sure that they're either locked or manned to make sure that someone can't come down from inside the hotel and get to the ballroom venue.
You raise an interesting point, Chris.
I think after action we'll talk about all that.
Well, let's talk about that, because on the one hand, you raise an interesting point about whether the investigation will tell us, did he try other means to get into that ballroom as opposed to trying to bum rush this magnetometer and failed? But also the idea of, look, Michael, I mean, this is the third potential assassination attempt against this president. Does the security protocols, do they need to be changed in some way? Or do you think that the fact that this is obviously a failure at an assassination attempt, does that indicate that the protocols are working?
Well, let's be clear. It was absolutely a failed assassination attempt. It was not a failure on behalf of security. Now, to the layman, it appears that that's the case because he was able to blow right through that mag checkpoint, which, quite frankly, no one has actually reported accurately what that was. Is that mag checkpoint was stood up initially for the onslaught of individuals that were arriving. Once everybody was in their seats, the president, the vice president were on stage. Some of these mag checkpoints then are decommissioned or deconstructed and taken down and then posted with armed officers, which is what you see in the process of this video right here happening. And so, to me, what I'm witnessing is an individual who had done a lot of pre-planning. This was definitely premeditated. He had obviously done some type of reconnaissance, as he stated in his manifesto. And he saw an opportunity, knowing that he probably was never going to get past those magnetometers. And I can assure you this individual never had the opportunity to get to the president or the vice president. There were so many concentric layers, even beyond when he was stopped, that he would have run into. We have to consider the fact that inside that ballroom, there's technical security measures in place. There are the FBI's protective detail for Kash Patel. There's Robert Kennedy's protective detail. There's other protective details. You have 2 counter assault teams in there, which would have absolutely slaughtered this individual had he come in there shooting. He would have never made it in there. That's just the facts.
I hear you. And certainly what happened bears that out. But Chris, many people have never seen the Washington Hilton. Most people will never be inside the ballroom with the line of succession, to say the least. But the idea that it's held there every year, people can be a guest of the hotel. This person checked in with a gun the day before the President of the United States, and many dignitaries like the cabinet members were able to be there. That raises some questions for people about whether either this many people in that line of succession should be in the same room, or the fact that the hotel is able to be open to the public more broadly at the time of this ballroomed event. Does that factor into you to the decision of where to hold events, but also where the president and members of the line of succession should actually be?
It certainly does. I mean, I think I've heard several Secret Service agents, former Secret Service agents, quoted in saying that it's a nightmare of a venue because of the presence of all of those different public officials, people, the first 5 in the line of succession for the presidency, which to me just ups the ante. It makes it a much more serious event. It probably should have been declared a tier 1 event, or I can't remember whether it's levels or tiers, but it should have been one of the highest level events, which calls out all kinds of resources and protocols. And in this case, that didn't happen. I don't think that they would spare resources in this type of situation. I think the Secret Service applied all the resources that they thought they needed in this case. That's a massive hotel. But I still go back to the fact that just some basic stuff, and we'll see what comes out in the after action. But sealing off stairwells leading to that upper floor, leading down to the ballroom. Maybe or maybe he didn't have a chance to get into the venue, but he had an opportunity to get close enough to do damage. And I think that's going to be the top, or the subject, or the thrust of the after action report when it comes out.
Well, thank goodness for the Secret Service members and law enforcement who were there. They were obviously very capable in their roles, and thank God they saved so many lives from what could have been a far worse incident. But I wonder how they're going to correct and how they're going to learn from this for planning in 30 days from now, according to the president. Chris Wecker, Michael Matranga, thank you both of you so much. Up next, a former